Are you looking to improve your engine's performance? Well,
preparing for this video, I thought a lot about my younger self and die grinder in hand and ready to port my first cylinder head. If I could go back in time and teach him how to port that first cylinder head successfully, I'd have saved myself a whole lot of time and grief, headache and frustration. But I can't seem to find that flux capacitor to put in my DeLorean to go back and do that. So this video is going to be what I wish I could have told my younger self. By following my steps, theories, and math, you will successfully port your first or your next cylinder head. Porting the head takes a lot of muscle memory. When you start porting your first head, it can get frustrating quickly because it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of mistakes. Mistakes are not bad, mistakes are learning. And you'll never know how to use a die grinder, you'll never get proficient with a die grinder unless you fire that thing up and use it, because you're using muscles you don't normally use. So when you're grinding on that port and that thing keeps jumping around and you can't control it, stop. Just stop, go get a drink, go eat a meal, go do something for a little while and then come back. You'll find that you have a lot better control of the die grinder and you can continue on and start grinding and porting it in the way you'd like to.
also stay to the end for the most important rule you'll ever learn.
Let's start talking about what tools we need before we can start porting. I don't know if we can see all this, but I will put it in front of the camera so that you can see it. All this stuff I'll have links to so that you can go buy it, but this is one of the most important tools you'll need when you start to prepare to port your cylinder head. Mine I have ground and bent and manipulated to make fit what I've been doing, so I decided to buy a new one. These other two you will use, but rarely. But when I went to go buy this one, this was $14 or a set for $14. So I chose just to buy a complete set. You can choose whatever you'd like. They're cheap, but they're important for your first set of cylinder heads. The next thing, you gotta have a shield to put around your face so that you don't get all the metal filings and shit in your face. And you should be wearing eye protection underneath these, but these are dirt cheap. There's what, 4 of them in here, and I don't think I paid 10 bucks for the whole lot. You can buy more expensive ones, you can buy better quality ones, but your first head porting, you don't want to spend $1,000, $4,000 on equipment if you don't know whether you like porting cylinder heads or not. If you get a kick out of it and you enjoy it, then great, start investing in more money. But for your first cylinder head, let's stick with as inexpensive as you possibly can. You got your face shield. The next thing is die clean or diclem, or however you want to pronounce it. This is very important when you're grinding around the intake seat and you don't want to hit it. You can put this on here to mark it so you know how close you're getting. But I just bought this because I was out, and this goes a long ways. But you don't have to buy this to do that. You simply, a black magic marker. Take and mark the seat, wipe it off around so it's showing just the seat, and now you know exactly where you can grind and where you should not. So it's up to you. This works pretty good, I like it, but this works and it's dirt cheap. These are my favorite porting tools. But for you, once again, I have a whole bunch of these. These are just the ones that I use all the time. But for you, with your first porting experience, a little stone you can do a lot with. It won't grab, it'll be easy to use, and it'll be real good for you to learn how to use a die grinder and how to sculpt a port without it catching and tearing things up. Once you start using these, you have to learn the light touch to be able to cut the metal without it grabbing and digging and cutting holes where you don't want them. A little bit of emery cloth, clean up some of the burrs and imperfections of the port. Little teeny things like this to get into tight spots, bigger ones to get into better parts. These are easy to use, easy to control, and won't gouge. But there's going to be places where you'll want to, yeah, well, we'll talk about these in another video. Anyways, and like I said, I ordered me a new set because these were all wore out. But it was dirt cheap too. It was like 14, maybe 20 bucks. That's what you'll use most of the time. However, like I said, you need this, and you need some kind of die grinder. So you use this and a die grinder to do more of the heavier work. Now, if you haven't got a compressor, this die grinder is no good to you. So there's other options. This is a cheap way of doing this, but be forewarned. If you do it this way, the sharpness of this bit will go away fast. And that is to put in an electric drill and port your cylinder head with an electric drill. The reason this will dull so fast is these are meant to turn 10,000 RPM. They are meant to spin very fast, and when they spin that fast, they stay cool. If you have an electric drill that, I don't know, doesn't turn that fast, doesn't turn a tenth that fast, and sit there and try to grind with it, you'll destroy one of these bits fast. Doesn't mean you still can't use it and it still won't cut. But the first 5 minutes of this bit will cut 10 times faster than the rest of the time you use it. So I don't recommend it, but you can use it and make it work. Complete set of heads ported, you'll go buy you a die grinder. So if you haven't got compressed air at your garage, shop, whatever, this is worthless. The next step, going to Harbor Freight and buying one of these cheap electric grinders. And that's what I did. The problem is you have it on and you have it off. 10,000 RPM, 0. You put one of these burrs in it and it'll shake your hands so bad that you can't get to that switch to shut it back off. So you buy this super cheap thing and it's worthless to you. You can't use it at all. So what do? You have to buy one of these and you hook your drill up to it, and you can turn it to where you can adjust how fast it turns, or you can just turn it all the way on, which of course with that die grinder you don't ever want to do that. Turn it on when it's at low, and then with the die grinder in your hand you adjust that speed to the speed that works for you. This works, but it's a pain in the butt. Sorry. It's a real pain. I hate this thing. I don't know why I still have it, because I don't use it. It just sucks. The next step is to buy one of these that is RPM controlled. So you don't have to buy one of these. It's adjusted on the electric die grinder, and they work a lot better. I was looking up one the other day, and you can get a cheap one for like 77 bucks. These two lamps, each one of them I don't think was over 20 bucks, but you need to be able to see inside that port, and that port gets mighty dark. And to be able to have this laying down and shine up inside the port, or having it on top shining down on the port while you're in there trying to die grind and cut, makes a world of difference. Once again, you don't want to spend any more money than you have to the first time. Or at least that's my motto. I've always been, do things on the cheap. Do things the cheapest way you can. I mean, obviously, the fastest way, push the easy button, is to go buy a set of aluminum heads. They'll probably, even the cheapest ones out there, will probably flow as good, if not a little better than what we're gonna do. But that takes a lot of money. All this stuff is just your time. If you're willing to put your time into it, you can take a factory cast iron head and make it perform similar to a cheap aluminum head. And that's our goal with this particular video. Now, we still have, what else? Oh yeah, so we talked about these. They'll be used to measure your port. Well, once you put it in, fumble fingers, once you put it in the port and you measure this out and get it to the width of it that you want to measure, what is that measurement? You need to have a veneer caliper. These also are pretty cheap. This one is an actual dial style veneer caliper, which you can get digital, where it takes a battery, for cheaper than you can get these. But once again, you can get a cheap set of these for 20 some odd bucks. But you want to have that so that once you've measured your port, you can go in here and put this up against it and go, that's 1 inch, 190 thousandths. And then you measure the port the other way, get it up in there until it hits where it needs to. You measure it, that's 1 inch, 945 thousandths. These are things that we'll be needing to know when we do a little bit of math to make sure we get the port right. And the last thing, you have to decide what you're going to do with this head. Are you going to send it to a machine shop because all the guides are shot in it and it's got 10 burnt valves and you need to have the head rebuilt? Or is it a completely good cylinder head, you just want to make more power out of it? Well, the reason I say that is because you need a valve spring compressor. Because you can't get in there and port them cylinders until you get the valve out of your way. If you're going to take it to a machine shop and have them do all that work, you just tell them not to put the valves in or cut the final seat until you take it back and port it all. Then take it back to them, have them cut the seats, put the valves in, and do everything else for you. Simple, easy peasy. If you're not going to do any of that, you're just going to pull the heads, pull the valves, and port them, you got to have one of these. Now, there's two different styles. There's this style, which you have to have the cylinder head off to use. There's another style, and like I said, I'll have all these in the show notes. But there's a jaw type spring compressor that you can put around the spring compressor. It has a nut on it, and you spin it up and it pulls the spring up to where you can take the locks out. I'll show you that in a little bit. But I'm just saying, you can use this one or that one. The jaw type one, you can change valve springs when it's still on the vehicle. It takes a little more than just that, but that's the tool that you use so you don't have to pull the cylinder head off. I think we've covered all the tools that you need. And like I said, you don't need all these, but you need some of these. Whether it's a marker, or it's die clean, whether it's a simple flashlight that you stick up into the port so you can see what you're doing, or some lights. But that's your basic arsenal you're going to need before you ever start porting this head. And you really need to watch this video to the end and then gather your parts and watch it again. Understand and be more accurate when you start that first sling of metal. There's also a bunch of porting acronyms that you need to know, so when I'm using them and discussing stuff inside the port, you understand and know what they are. I'll show them to you now and go over the ones that are important for your first head porting. Alrighty, now we're ready to pull the valve out. Now, if you've never done this before, This is very important. It'll be really hard to get the retainer to release, which is this part from the keeper, which is down inside here, if you don't do this. I'm going to move this up closer because hopefully you can hear the sound, so you know. Now if you listen to it, you hear the sound change. Once you've done that, you've released the lock, and when you use the valve spring compressor, it will come out mucho easier. Now, once you've got it compressed, you want to get a magnet. Yep, let's just move you over here and make life easier. Okay. You want to put all your stuff at some place you're not going to lose it. I'm putting it in this little container. Okay. This is also very important if you're going to try to do this without taking it to the machine shop. So now, slowly, yeah. A lot of times the lock or the surface here will be swelled slightly. You won't be able to get that out. So this may be mushroomed a little bit, or these locks may have burrs in them, and you want to take sandpaper or a file or something to smooth that off before you pull it out of the guide, or you'll damage the guide. And then you see how much play there is. And it's not terrible, but it's not good. It's actually pretty bad, actually. Yeah, that guide's hammered. Next thing we want to do, we want to go in and just clean up the port. No porting, just clean it up. And this one isn't that dirty. Better than bugs and dugs and shit. It ain't that bad. If you don't have compressed air in your shop, you know, the things you spray all the dust out of your computer, buy you a case of these. We haven't ported a thing yet. We've just cleaned it up. See all the burrs and flaws and all the casting flaws that are in it. Haven't even touched any of them. I just cleaned all the carbon out of it so I can see what the shape of the port looks like. So now let's go through all these abbreviations, acronyms, and descriptions. And this ain't all of them, but this is what's important for your first head porting job. And some of them I'm just gonna brush over, and some of them we're gonna get pretty in depth into. Let's start with where we're at with the head right now, and that will be your seat angle, your top cut, your bottom cut, and the radius we'll be talking more about on the exhaust side. I guess we need to talk about surface finish. If you want to show off to your buddy, polish the crap out of it. 10 hours of your life you'll never get back. Polishing does no good. Well, if you want to polish the exhaust port, okay. Don't polish the intake port. There will be people who will disagree with me. The intake port, when you're finished, should be 80 grit max. You don't want it any shinier than that. So now let's take a look at the port here and understand where the seat is, where the top cut is, and where the bottom cut is. And I'll be willing to bet you there isn't a bottom cut, because these are factory heads. This is the way they came from the factory. I'm pretty sure no one's ever put a valve or a guide or anything into these. Well, actually, I'll put the valve in and make a mark where the seat is. You want to be very careful you don't catch the seat like I just did. Sandpaper roll, it doesn't leave too deep a groove. If you got a good head, as in the guides are still good, 3/8 wooden dowel, then put it in the guide. That way all this trash doesn't get in the guide and damage it. These guides are shit shot. I don't care. I don't care how much dirt and trash gets in them, because they're gonna have to be replaced. Now it's all cleaned up, you really can't see where the seat stops, where the seat ends. You just don't have a clue, so you don't know where you can grind and where you can't. Now, like I said before, simple old black magic marker, and you can mark that, put the valve in, rub the seat around, and you can see where it's at. Since I have, which is one more thing that I haven't told you, valve grinding compound, I'm gonna put just a teeny bit on it and spin it around, and then it'll show right up where the seat is at. Okay, I decided to use a magic marker since you're probably not going to have any valve grinding compound. And you can see now, you can see the shiny spot, which is where I just stuck the valve in, spun it around, and it cleaned off all the magic marker. So now you know where your seat is. You know that's where you stay away from when you're trying to do grinding inside the port. And anytime that it gets mucked up, you just add some more and put it in there. The advantage of using valve grinding compound is it'll leave a rough texture and your hand isn't going to rub it off. And it'll be there and you'll know exactly where it's at. Alright, back to the chart. Probably the first thing we should talk about before we talk about seat and seat angle is cross-sectional area or minimum cross-sectional area. Now that is the smallest spot in the port. That is where you should be grinding. Nowheres else. And the minimum cross-sectional area should always be right here. And it is, and that's where we're going to grind. But there's just too many people out there go and they look at the push rod pinch, and I'll show you that in a minute. But they look at the push rod pinch and they think that's where the restriction is, and they hog that all out, which doesn't help a thing. So that's what we're doing here, is we're trying to find out what size. Well, okay, first of all, let's just say this. There's a mathematical equation, which I will show you, and we can map out and decide exactly where the minimum cross-sectional area is, the smallest spot in the port. But just take my word, it's underneath the valve. This is a pipe, and it flows X amount. And it'll always flow X amount. It doesn't flow more, it doesn't flow less. That's just what it flows. As soon as you put a restriction in here, now this pipe will flow X amount of that size, because that's like it has a smaller pipe now, because that's the smallest section. At your seat, that is your minimum cross-sectional area. If you open this up too much, then it'll move up to here, and eventually it'll move up to the push rod pin. You always want to have the smallest cross-sectional area in the valve area. So if you open that up too much, you mess it up. You also, if you open this up too much, you cause extreme turbulence, which will slow the air down, and you'll get less out into the combustion chamber. Let's go back to what we're talking about here. Okay, so this is our top cut. This is our seat. This is our bottom cut, and it does have a bottom cut, so this is not a virgin cylinder head like I was hoping I was going to have for you to see. But we'll continue on. So we got top cut, seat, bottom cut, throat, which is this whole area here, and then you've got the bowl, which is down in here. The bowl is bigger than the throat, and the throat is what we're working on. So the first thing we have to do is make 4 measurements. We'll take a measurement here, we'll take a measurement here, we'll take a measurement here, and then we'll take a measurement here. Now you want to pay attention to the shape of the port so that you take it in the same place. It doesn't matter if you take it here or here, but do it in the same place every time. For me, I'm doing it here because the bowl comes down to here, the short side comes across here, so there's kind of a corner there, and that's where I measure it. And the same thing this way, there's kind of a corner here, and then of course straight up and straight across. So I've already taken all these measurements. So these are our measurements. Top to bottom, 1.551. Across is 1.514. Diagonally to the right is 1.560, and diagonally to the left is 1.586. We'll add that all up and divide it by 4. That's later. We're still talking about all of these things here. I need to find my red pen. I'll mark these as we go along. Quench or squish. But most of the small block Chryslers have an open chamber, and with an open chamber you basically have very little squish, very little quench. What does that mean? When your piston is coming up the bore and comes up to top dead center, if it has a area where it gets really close and it forces the air inward, that's called your squish or your quench. There is a little teeny bit of it because this is slightly bigger than the bore. So when the piston comes up, the air will push in just a little bit. What's the significance of that? It's all about once you get your air-fuel mixture in, now turbulence isn't a bad thing, turbulence is a good thing, or mixture motion. So as the piston comes up, it starts to stir up all the gas and fuel and try to mix it up better so that spark plug can ignite it and burn it quicker. You can take and shave these heads down to where this surface is the same height as that surface. It's also how you gain compression. There's positive and negative to both of these. When you bring this surface down to this, when that piston comes up, now this is a terrible example, but say this is your piston. When it comes up and goes up against there, it shoots all the air in this area to be pushed into this area. In the process of that, you're mixing it all up. You're mixing the air and fuel better, which creates a better combustion. There's good and bad both ways. It's bad because it's an open, so that you don't have that mixture motion or as much. But it also can be bad if you shave this head flat, shave it down to where this is the same as here. You have to, when the air comes out of the valve, it has to slow down at a rate. It has come out here, is slowed and stopped, and the air coming in hits it and causes it to back up slightly, but that's technical. Anyways, it's a closed chamber and an open chamber. That's the difference. That's the closed chamber and open chamber is the difference between not having quench and squish and having it. Radius is when you have your seat and the edge of that seat rolls out into the combustion chamber, and when you have a seat and the edge of that seat rolls and just as a complete smooth radius between the seat down inside. That's good for the exhaust. It is not good for the intake. You want to have these sharp edges from each different angle. So when it comes up to the 60-degree cut, which this one has, you want to round this part in, and this part of the 60 you want to keep sharp against the seat, and you want it sharp from the seat to the 30 or 60-degree cut, whatever it ends up being here. You want them sharp edges. The reason why is when the fuel that is dropped out comes dripping and running across here, instead of just dripping and running and hanging out all over inside the combustion chamber, them sharp edges shoot the fuel back up into the airstream, causing the fuel to mix back into it. So that's why it's bad to have a radius on your intake. On the exhaust, it's all gases, 100% vapor, and you want to get it out there as quick as you can. That's radius. Convergent. This is another one where we could talk for quite a while about, but we're just going to give you the concept. Convergent point of your port has to do with the valve, and when your valve first starts to open, it is controlling the speed and flow of every bit of air that's coming into the combustion chamber. And as it comes up, it allows more and more air in. At 25% of the valve diameter is where the convergence happens. When you get to the convergence point, that's when this valve no longer is controlling the total flow of the air. Is open 25% of its diameter. With a 202 valve, the convergence point is 0.505, which is a half an inch. So when this valve is open to half an inch, it's at its convergence point. That's far enough. We don't need to explain it any further. I'm trying to squirrel off and make it complicated. So now, from our throat to our bowl, which our bowl is bigger, all the way around, we now have our straight wall, they call it, or the common wall, and I'll explain that more in a second. We have our push rod pinch wall. That's where your push rods go in. The port comes like this and over into here. This is the push rod pinch wall, or some people call it the long wall. You have your short wall and you have your long wall. You also have your short side radius and apex. The short side radius is right here. This is where the air comes in, has to make a very short turn. The roof is where it goes in, has to come all the way out on the back and comes on out through here. That's the roof side. This is the short side radius. This is what we're not going to touch. This is what we're going to leave alone. But you need to understand where it's at. The apex, to make it simple terms, is the center point of that turn. The apex is the middle of that turn. Our guide, of course, is here. Here is where the roof becomes the bowl. Okay, we basically talked about it, but let's just make it clear. This is your combustion chamber. This is where the spark plug ignites the combustible fuel, ignites the fuel, causing heat and expansion to shove the piston down. This is your combustion chamber. We'll flip this thing over and then explain a few more of these icons and descriptions. When I'm talking about the roof, it's actually on the floor. When you're porting, this will mess you up all the time, because you'll turn it upside down to play with the roof, then you'll turn it right side up to play with the floor and the side walls and the straight wall and the common wall. Okay, I just threw a bunch of them at you. Let's explain what they are. First of all, this is the port opening, of course. This is where everybody cuts it open to the gasket surface. Do not cut this to the gasket surface. That's not how you port match. That's how everybody does it. They lay a brand new gasket up there, they scribe it out, and then they cut it open. Every time the air changes diameters, it slows down. Here, put a couple bolts in it and look at where the gasket opening is. Okay, take it off, put it on your intake manifold, and bolt it onto the intake manifold, and look where the port size is compared to the gasket surface. The gasket is oversized so that it fits no matter what you do to it. It is not a matching technical here again, but this is really important. When the air, okay, so that's basically the size of the port. If you bolt your intake on and the port on it is that same size, then the air comes in at the same size, same speed, same velocity, and enters the head. If you gasket match this, it comes from the intake port, it comes down, the air is coming down, heading towards the head, and it gets larger and then has to get smaller again to go through there. What is that going to do? You got a big huge pocket where the air has to go down, get big, get small again, and go back through. That's turbulence. It's not good. It will not improve the flow of your head. You want to match the port of the intake to the port of the head, not gasket matching. So obviously, this is the roof. This little bulge here is where your valve cover bolts on. So you don't want to mess with that too much. And for what we're doing, you don't need to mess with it at all. Now, once you go in here, you see it bulges out and back in. That is your push rod pinch. And everybody thinks that this is the restriction, that this is where you need to be cutting and grinding. I promise you, it is not. If you start getting real crazy with your porting, which you'll do when you've done 10 or 20 heads, this could become a restriction. It is not a restriction in your factory port that you're going to modify. Sure, you can take a sand roll, clean it all up, round it off a little bit. Stop. Leave it alone. Every porter in the world has the mentality of the bigger is better. We all know that it is not. But when you start to grind on that a little bit, it's like, oh, I should grind a little more here, and well, there's that little bump right there, so I should grind a little more here and a little more here to make that whole thing straight. And you just keep going and keep going, and all of a sudden, boom, you popped right through the push rod tube hole, and now you're done. Anyways, so now not floor, see, I already did it. This is the ceiling of the port. This is the floor of the port. This is your short side radius. This is what we don't mess with. This is the common wall because it's common. This port goes down into here. This port goes down into here. It's also called the short wall because it's pretty much straight into the combustion chamber. This is your long wall or your pushrod pinch wall because it has to go in, go clear off over to here and up to get out. So it takes a much longer path to get past the valve. Pushrod pinch or long wall, common wall, or short wall, however you want to call it. So this is our throat where we just went in and measured all the different sizes. So we've got 1.551 inches, 1.514, 1.560, 1.586. That's all the different sizes. So you add them all together equals 6.211. You divide it by 4 because we have 4 different areas that we've tried, equals 1.55275. It's 1.55 inches. Our port, our diameter of the bowl, or not the bowl, the diameter of the throat is 1.55. That is not the area, that is the diameter or the cross. That's where it gets mixed up. That's what I'm trying to explain here. We say cross-sectional area, so we're thinking, okay, the cross-section area is 1.55. It is not. It is 1.55 inches from here to here, average, because that's what we did, is we created the average. From here to here, the average distance is 1.55. Area is the whole thing, and we'll get to that in a minute. And you have to know what the heads are going on to decide just how big or how small you want your minimum cross-sectional area, and we'll get into that right now. Okay, our first math we need to learn is bore times stroke times RPM times 0.00353. That'll give you a number. You divide that by 613.8, and that will give you minimum cross-sectional area. Well, I'll explain that just a little bit further in a second. So my truck, or the heads that are going to go on that burgundy truck in there, I have a 4.03 bore times 4.03 bore times a 360 stroke, which is 3.58, times 5,000 RPM times 0.00353 equals this times 6.13.8 gives me a 1.67 cross-sectional area. Well, you're going 1.56, I'm not that far away. This is inches. This is diameter. This is cross-sectional area. Don't get the two mixed. We'll get to figuring these two out. We're just trying to figure out what the area of the minimum cross-section needs to be for a 30 over bore stock stroke 360 that is going to turn a maximum of 5,000 RPM. So if it's going to turn 5,000 RPM, I need a minimum cross-sectional area of 1.67. And this is the math how you do it. Whether you got a 318, whether you got a 340, whether you got a stroker with a 408, 410, whatever. This is the math you use. So for my truck, I figured 3 of them. Whether I'm gonna keep the stock cam that's in it now and it turns 5,000 RPM, or if I can put a little bit bigger one in there, or if I was gonna put a bigger one to turn 6,000 RPM. So that's the first of our math. Now we know what cross-section what minimum cross-section area we need. This is what we have, but this is diameter, not cross-sectional area. Now the next math will help us figure that out. The next thing we need to figure out is intake valve diameter percentage. The diameter of the intake valve times 85% to 89%. So mine is a 1.88 intake valve times 0.85 equals 1.60. 1.60 inches. Maximum of the 1.88 valve times 89% equals 1.67. So you've got a range of 1.60 to 1.67 inches in diameter. And we're at 1.55. So we got a little room, we can open that up. Now the other variable, which is what I showed you up here, is considering the size of the throat by the RPM that you're going to run, whether it's 5, 55, 6. I mean, you can do this math. You could go all the way to 7,000, 8,000 RPM, but you know that a stock head in stock form is not going to get anywhere near that. That's why I've got 5,000 to 6,000 RPM. So you bring that over, RPM, it's 1.67 to 2.00. That is diameter. This is area, not diameter. So diameter is from the outside to the outside. That's not actually 100% accurate because we're going from the inside to the inside is diameter. Area is like you took a pipe and you sliced it across, or a solid piece of steel, or a sausage, or whatever you want to put it as. The area is everything inside here. And that's what this is. So you got to convert area back to diameter to know the math. And that's what we're going to do next. All right, area to diameter. We got to take the area divided by 3.14, which is pi, and that's as far as I take pi. 3.14159 equals, and it'll give you a number. You take the square root of that, that's the square root sign, times 2 gives you your diameter. So let's go through it. We are 1.67 divided by 3.14, 0.53157796. The square root of that, it's even on your phone. If you use your phone and you just turn it to the side, there. So if you hit square root, it gives us this number times 2 equals, of course I had to mess up on me, 1.67 divided by 3.14159 is that number, square root times 2 equals a real long number, but the number that we care about is 1.45. Now we could round it up because it's actually 1.4581 and da 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 da. So we could put it as 1.45 or 1.46 because we could round it up. We're not going to round it up. We're going to stick with 1.5.
We're going to stick with 1.45.
Is the diameter of 1.6 area. So here we've got them all converted from area to diameter. So with the RPM figure, we need to consider, or need to look at this as this is absolute minimum area, absolute minimum diameter, and the minimum cross-sectional area, the smallest part of your port that you must have to to make it to 5,000 RPM or to make it to 6,000 RPM. Now if you've got it cut this size or bigger, you're still going to be able to turn 6,000 RPM. Don't take this too literally, because the camshaft will be the determining factor as to what RPM range it makes power, what max RPM the engine is capable of turning. This is just to make sure that you're in the ballpark, and we use this one and this one to keep us focused and make the port breathe like the rest of the engine wants it to. I want mine to turn at least 5,000 RPM. So at 1.55, my throat is big enough. I don't need to port it, I don't need to do anything to it. It's ready to go. But it's not. We need to have enough area to shape it, and I'll show you that in here in just a minute. So I promised you the first of this video that I was going to tell you the most important rule that you're ever going to ever need to know. Well, this video is getting a little bit long, and we're going to have a part 2. So I will have to give you that rule on part 2. I promised you I'd give it to you now, but it's going to have to wait till part 2. So gather up all your porting tools and get ready to start slinging some metal. And if you need help with any of them tools, I've got links down below that'll help you out. So when it's done, I'll have a link up here, and you can click on that and we'll continue this porting experience. Oh yeah, like and subscribe.